Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. I'm Tundra Abiola.
And I'm Biola Alabi.
In the past 1 month, the subject of who a Nigerian citizen is and who should qualify to contest for political office in the land was briefly thrown into the nation's public space. In their opening submission at the Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal, President Buhari's legal team had accused his rival during the last presidential election, Atiku Abubakar, of being a Cameroonian and therefore ineligible to stand as a candidate in the first place. The noise generated by all that has once again brought key questions to the fore. To what extent has 59 years of self-governance improved the lot of Nigerians? Have the Nigerian people got value for their investment? Where does the Buhari persona and the integrity theme that underpins his 2 excursions into public service rank in terms of bringing the country to her rightful place in the global scheme of things? To get more perspective on this, we are now being joined by Dr. Nicky Okoye, co-founder of Transcorp PLC, former Chief Strategy Officer of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and a former financial consultant with Merrill Lynch in the United States. Welcome to the program, Dr. Okoye.
Thank you very much for having me.
So let's start with the question of citizenship, most recently brought to the fore, as we said in the intro, by the reply to Atiku Abubakar of PDP's petition to the Presidential Election Tribunal, whereby APC refuted his right to have contested the elections in the first place, claiming that he's not a citizen of Nigeria by birth, as is required by the Constitution. So what were your views on that? Let's start with...
Well, my views on that is it just shows the quality of the leadership Nigeria has been saddled with. Atiku Abubakar has been vice president of Nigeria for 8 years. And so if we're talking about his eligibility to be a political leader at this stage, then it shows that the leadership and the folks who are bringing up that question, they really don't have Nigeria's interest at heart. It's not a fundamental issue as regards the election. I don't think so. I think the fundamental issues are who won the election based on the majority of the votes cast by the Nigerian people. And if any of the candidates has citizenship questions, those questions should have been answered before they got into public office. The 2 candidates in question, President Buhari has been head of state of Nigeria before, and he has been head of state for the last 4 years. Atiku Abubakar has been vice president of Nigeria before, and he's served Nigeria in many capacities as a public servant in the Nigerian customs and so on and so forth. So I don't think that issue should have been raised at all. So in my perspective, I think it boils down to the quality of the folks on the side of the legal team that are advising the president. Maybe they couldn't find anything else, and so they're clutching at straws. That's my opinion.
And last week, we had someone actually come on from a constitutional perspective to talk about the Constitution and the validity of the citizenship issue. Going forward, do you think that this is something that people in that region should be worried about, or do you think that this is sort of a red herring once and we're never going to see this again?
Well, if you look at it from a constitutional standpoint, I'm not a constitutional expert. However, there was a clause in the Constitution that covered all the folks that became part of Nigeria as a result of some of those referendums and negotiations that happened.
And plebiscite.
Plebiscite, exactly. And I think the Constitution recognized that. And so whether it happened before 1960 independence or after 1960, I think that's irrelevant. The fact is that Nigeria is, as far as independence is concerned, is just over 60 years old. Now that means that there are a lot of folks that are still alive that were born before independence. You know, so are you going to refer to them as non-Nigerians by birth as well, because they were born before Nigeria gained its independence? So I believe the Constitution covers that, and again, it's going to be tested in court anyway. So let's allow the courts to make the final, decision on that. But in my opinion, it's clutching at straws. It's not a fundamental issue as regards the 2019 general election, because what we should be concerned about is who won the election.
Sure.
Who did Nigerian people vote for?
On the larger issue, is Nigeria a nation or a state?
Nigeria is a nation state.
Easy one out.
So
why did you describe us as a nation state?
well, it's I think Nigeria is a work in progress. We've been struggling since independence, to find our feet. It's a combination of nations. Before independence, we had about 3 major regions of the country. And then after independence, the politicians created a 4th region in the Midwest, but there was the Eastern, Western, and Northern. Then the Midwest became the 4th one after independence, which was created by Nigerian politicians. So those regions were considered as almost like nations, if you will, because there was a very loose framework in which Nigeria was governed. A great way to point that out was that the first prime minister of Nigeria, Tafawa Balewa, was actually the lieutenant of Ahmadu Bello, who was the premier of the North. So the premier of the North, who was the leader of the MPC, preferred to stay as premier of the North, which is what we call governor today, as opposed to come down to Lagos to become prime minister of the whole Nigeria. So he felt that being in charge of the North was a more influential position as opposed to being prime minister of Nigeria. And he was right, because at that time, the regions had much more power than the center. Now, fast forward, the military government, came and muddled things up a bit, created a unitary system for Nigeria, which after 50, 60 years is clearly not working. So what Nigeria needs now is to look at it again and find how can these various nation states work together, maybe go back to what we were doing before, but maybe with a few adjustments, because we've had the benefit of hindsight now. We've had the benefit of 50 to 60 years of learning, and we can put a better structure together. So it's a work in progress.
One of the things you talked about a minute ago was about the quality of leadership and that we're saddled with in Nigeria. I'd like you to talk a little bit about, and I know you're very focused on youth development and youth empowerment. I'd like to get a sense from you, when you saw the Not Too Young to Run bill, I would like to get a sense what you thought and how you thought that could be a beginning of changing the type of leadership and what we need to do to make sure that that promise is not.
Okay. Well, it's a very good question. I think that, first of all, let me clarify my own position. I don't think you can choose leaders based on age. So whether somebody is young or old does not qualify you to be an astounding or an outstanding leader. Leadership has qualities, and leadership is influence. And some of those qualities and some of those responsibilities of leadership, if you have those qualities and those responsibilities, then you are going to make a good leader. One of the youngest governors in the current network of Nigerian governors, 36 governors, one of the youngest governors, I believe, is the governor of Kogi State. And he is a terrible example of a leader, but he's young. So if you choose him based on his age, then you're going to end up getting, not so competent leaders. So the issue is not about age. The issue is about fortitude, commitment. What are these folks? What are their values?
So, I think that part of age is if you're excluded, you're not able to participate. So by having an age limit or an age exclusion, you're not even able to participate. I think that's part of
Well, as far as that is concerned, then yes, I agree that when you become an adult, there's a specific cutoff point where people who are adults can participate. But I also don't agree with the low barrier to entry as far as the education is concerned. You see, one of the lies told about democracy is that democracy can function in a society where folks are illiterate. It's simply not true. Democracy is based on a literate society. It's based on people understanding what is required of a leader. If I'm going to vote for you, I need to understand your message. I need to understand your manifesto. That's the only way I can choose between Agnes and Okechukwu or Ibrahim or Kunle, you can only choose between the candidates if you understand the details of what they promise to do or what they plan to do. And you can only understand that if you're educated. So the problem Nigeria has is that the uneducated folks who are clearly in the majority are choosing the leaders based on, they can't choose them based on education or their knowledge of the manifesto because they don't have the education. So they now have to fall back to sentiments. And those sentiments are driven by your religion or your tribe or whatever it is that I see myself in you. So if I see you and you're from the same part of the country as me, or even if we're some part, maybe we're from the same zone, and if we're not from the same zone, then we're from the same village, so it goes down, right down to zoning and villages and family, units. And that's what they're left with because they don't have an education. So
do you think this is an exception in Nigeria? In Nigeria?
It's more pronounced in Nigeria because in more developed societies, most of the population are educated. And so they understand fully the dynamics of democracy. Now, I only raised that issue because you talked about the cutoff point for leadership. So I think even if we can't address the society getting educated to vote for leaders, then let's at least put a minimum educational requirement for the folks who will present themselves for candidates. And for now, the minimum requirement is a secondary school certificate. You will not hire a secondary school certificate to manage your corner shop because that person will fail. The person doesn't understand balance sheets. The person doesn't understand profit and loss. He doesn't understand how to endear customers. There is nobody out there, an entrepreneur, a business person, that is going to hire anybody based on a secondary school certificate. But that happens to be the basis by which we are choosing the president, governors, and all our leaders. So it's a complete misnomer, which we must change if we want to have a serious society.
The bar is extremely low, to put it politely. But I wanted to take you back a little bit when you were talking about how we arrived at this unitary system of government that we operate and how we have different nations. Nigeria is made up of different nations. How do we converge into one? Is it at all possible? Because as you rightly said, not many of us citizens, to use the theme of this morning, act in the collective interest. Our interests are narrow, they're parochial. How are we ever going to progress?
Very good question. I think, first of all, it boils down again to leadership. If we get the right leadership, it's not rocket science. There are many nations across the world that have gone through the transition that we are currently going through. Now, what the difference is that a great leader emerges and understands what needs to be done, mobilizes his or her people behind a specific direction, gets the citizens to have a mindset shift, and everybody rallies. I mean, Singapore is a typical example of, Singapore was able to do what it has done as a result of the intervention of leadership. There is no other, if you take Lee Kuan Yew out of the equation, Singapore would have been a basket case. It has no raw materials, it has no natural resources. It's an island nation, with splinter of other islands. And yet they have moved into the first world. And they are, some of the biggest and most efficient shipping yards. They build some of the best ships in the world are coming from Singapore. Some of the most profitable companies in the world are headquartered in Singapore as a result of the environment they have been able to create. And it was just leadership. You see, the problem Nigeria has, and a lot of other African countries are suffering the same thing, is leadership. Because our people excel when they go out into the Western world, when they go out into the first world. Some of the best doctors in the United States are Nigerians. It's a Nigerian, Dr. Omalu, that won the award from the American Medical Association for discovering a disease in the American National Football League.
Yes, the movie Concussion was based
They
on
did
his
a
work.
movie, Concussion, based on him, acted by one of the greatest actors in America, Will Smith. Will Smith is a $20 million a movie actor. So it tells you that real serious money went into that movie because the story was so powerful. And it was a movie about a Nigerian doctor. And there are thousands of Nigerian doctors like that doing so well in the United States. There are Nigerians in IT, in Facebook, in Google, you know, in Amazon, doing extremely well. Same thing in the UK, in Japan, in China, where Nigerians are all over. So we have the right people. We have educated people. We have committed people. Our leadership has refused, for some strange reason, to take advantage of the quality of the Nigerian people. So we need a leader that understands the value of education, first of all, and the value of professionalism, if you will. And then that leader can pull together the strength of our professionals, not just those folks in the diaspora. I only use the diaspora as an example because those people are operating in a society that is not choosing them based on their race or their tribe or their religion. They're just choosing them based on their merits. If you can do the job, you get the job. And that is where we have excelled. The last report done by the United States Commerce Department has shown that Nigerians are the most educated immigrant society in the United States. The most, which means that family, those values that we took from Nigeria, we're taking it internationally and we're still doing well. We're making sure our children stay in school. We're making sure they go all the way to master's degrees, some of them to post PhD degrees and so on and so forth. We just need the political leadership to create that bridge. There needs to be a bridge between the professionals and the politicians. That hasn't happened yet.
So one of the things you're talking about when you use places like Singapore as an example is the development of the people, which is really a big focus on education. You've also said in past articles that there has been an overemphasis on oil in Nigeria. What would you like to see this new, as Buhari embarks on his second term, what emphasis would you like to see on the development of people from an education perspective? So that means more of the people above the ground than the things below the ground.
Yes, well, if you look at oil, we're currently making about $28 billion in revenues from oil every year. That's where all the attention is. And that is the sad part of the story, because the real value that the Nigerian people have is actually in our intellectualism. If we develop that part of the Nigerian people, we can do 20 to 30 times. We can do $200 to $300 billion in revenue just by developing our skills. So what I'm saying is that the development in terms of educating the people does far more, 20 times, will do far more than what oil is doing. A friend of mine was telling me just yesterday how some young boys were educated or trained in software development over the last 6 months. 3 of them just got offers to work in Australia. The offers came with job offers, with visas, work permits, everything. From here, from Lagos. They did not have to travel to Australia to do the interview. They were interviewed over the internet. They've gotten job offers, they're packing their bags, and they're leaving in the next 2 weeks. There are a lot of folks that are having this. Germany is sending teams down to Nigeria. They hosted a team about 2 months ago where they had over 1,000 software developers, and they tested all of them. They hired about 100 of them. And all that 100 is going to Germany to go and work in the IT, in the information technology industry. Now, these are folks who have trained themselves. What I'm saying is that if the government is serious, what we need to do is to realize that the oil, first of all, if you look at human history, first of all, it was gold. Then gold became oil. So you started calling oil, the black gold. Now, it's intellectualism. It's the human capital development. So this is now the gold and the oil put together, but it's on steroids. It's on a rocket ship because it's going to do 10 to 20, 30 times the value of oil and gold. We just need to educate them. We just need to educate the people because for some good reason, our people have the brain matter that is required to compete at international levels.
So I have a question for you. This president has already left hints that infrastructure is going to be a big focus of their administration. Would you say that infrastructure funding should be shifted to education? I mean, when we say we need to educate people, actually, how do we do it?
Well, we need to build institutions. We need to build world-class institutions. And maybe if we don't even need to build them from scratch, we need to go to every university in Nigeria and build an innovation center in current universities. There are over 160 universities in Nigeria. So it's not that complicated to achieve. There needs to be a world-class innovation center in every university in Nigeria, churning out folks in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the STEM sciences. Once you focus in that area, in the next 5 years, Nigeria will be churning out hundreds of thousands of professional, well-trained engineers in information technology. And they will not need to travel to get the work. The work can be done here, they will be paid here in dollars, and they will spend the money here in dollars. That's how you grow an economy. So, but if you allow them to train themselves, which is what is happening, they take off and they go and start new lives abroad. The only money we will get is the money that comes back in remittances because they left families behind. But if we want to move society, the entire society forward, the entire nation forward, then the government needs to be involved in the training. The government needs to set up these centers, bond these folks, give people scholarships in order to get this training. And then those institutions around the world that need their skills will come here and set up their bases. That's exactly what happened in India. That's exactly what happened in China. It's happening now in Taiwan. It's been happening across the world, so it's not rocket science. It's going to keep happening. You just need to get your people ready.
And you can make Nigeria into a tech hub like those other countries. Apart from international competition and diversification away from that mono economy that we have, you've also written about a different form of diversification, that the whole of Nigeria is more than just Lagos. Why does everybody from all over Nigeria insist on coming to just develop Lagos? Can you expand on that? Because I found that really interesting.
Yes, well, we have over, depending on whose figures that you look at, we have over 180 to 200 million people. And Lagos is already currently the most populated city in Africa and one of the most populated in the world. Lagos cannot continue to take all this population. People can't keep rushing to Lagos. Now, so it needs to be a policy of the federal government to identify other strategic locations that could be propped up to take the pressure off Lagos. That needs to be a federal government policy. And the best way to do it will, of course, to do it based on the regional blocks that existed in the past. So look at the South-South, look at the Southeast, look at the North-Central, look at the Northeast and the Northwest. So we need to create 5 new cities, 5 new commercial centers where the pressure from Lagos can ease. Because Lagos cannot keep taking this pressure. It's becoming too much. Now, when you create these 5 new centers, you use a specific, each of them must have a specific anchor. So if you're going to put something in the South-South, for instance, what is the anchor? Calabar is, and across the river, that environment has done so well in terms of developing their old palm settlements and palm islands. I know a company called PZ Wilmot that is doing about 25,000 hectares. They did that 4 years ago. So now they're actually in the harvesting period. So that area can do well in agricultural processing, if you will. So you make agricultural processing an anchor. You can also anchor that area with world-class port facilities, because one of the big constraints that Lagos has is that everybody is moving to Lagos to import and export. And if you've gone to Apapa any day of the week, you realize the traffic gridlock because of the pressure on the ports. And all the three ports are pretty much in the same area, you know. So if you focus for the South-South, ports, agricultural processing, you know, in the Southeast, you can focus on education. You know, they're already distinguished themselves. For instance, Anambra State, where I come from, some of the young people went to the United States and won the Teletron Award, Global Technology Award for all young people across the entire world. In fact, they were the only ones to qualify from Africa. And then they won. They won countries like Japan. They won countries like China, Singapore, Korea. Everybody, the best in the world were in that competition. So the press didn't really give due justice to what those young girls won. And it was just as a result of one teacher being able to sit down with these young girls for just a year and get them to that world-class level. And then another group of young boys have done the same thing in a similar competition that was held in North Africa just about 2 weeks ago. But they came third, not first. But what it means is that that area can anchor education. If we put, you know, some serious investments in education, we can get some of the best chaps there. And then you will have all these big companies coming to set up their bases there. I understand that Facebook and Google are setting up bases in Ghana.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, what happened is because we haven't prepared ourselves.
Sure.
Because Nigeria would have been the obvious choice. The EU delegation for the entire West Africa is headquartered in Abuja. So politically, they see Nigeria as the capital of West Africa and Africa. But commercially and economically, they go elsewhere because that is where they see the folks are ready. You have to prepare yourself. You have to get the training facilities together. You have to get your people ready. And if you don't do that, then the private companies are not going to come. And it's only when the private companies come, then you can expect the value that is created by giving people high-paying jobs. When people get high-paying jobs, the standard of living will rise because those high-paying jobs, folks, will want to live in nice houses. They want to drive nice cars. And so the economy just keeps going. And that's what happens, and that's how societies develop.
Sorry, you brought up Facebook and Google and them setting up in Ghana. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about something else because those type of things are foreign direct investment. One of the things you've also advocated for is local direct investment.
Correct.
When you see people like Google and Facebook leaving, what is the antidote of not coming? They didn't even leave, they just didn't come. And then the last year, we've also seen companies leave. What is the antidote and how can local direct investment be that?
Well, the local direct investment, I think if you look at Africa, even if you add the Caribbean, so let's say African descent, so all the Africans and the Caribbeans, all the nations of Africa and the Caribbean, Nigeria is the one African nation that has tremendous potential to mobilize local direct investment. It is probably the best because our people are doing so well as far as business and commerce is concerned across the world. But they're doing it individually. So you have one person doing extremely well, you know, in one area. You have somebody else doing extremely well in another area, but it's all dissipated. The power of aggregation has not been taken advantage of. We've not been able to put that together. So when you go to any city across Nigeria, you find out that there are a lot of mushroom hotels. People build a hotel, 20-room, 30-room hotels. You find that in a city like Owerri, for instance, there are hundreds and hundreds of small hotels, you know. But there is no big 5-star hotel, which can only be achieved if we come together, if we aggregate. And that is the power of aggregation. The reason why we are being we've proliferated and we've almost thinned out our effect on national development because we're not aggregating, we're not mobilizing, and we're not coming together. And so my suggestion and my strategy, especially for the governors, because you don't even need the president to do this. It's the responsibility of the governors to get the high net worth entrepreneurs together in each state, identify projects that we could all pull together and make it happen. When there was so much debate during the political season about the second Niger Bridge, the bridge between Onitsha and Asaba, I wrote a paper and I said, why do we need the federal government to build that bridge? That bridge is bankable. It's designed to cost about $500 to $600 million. We just need 600 people to give us $1 million each, and that bridge is done.
With the federal-backed, you could actually do a federal-backed bond.
Exactly. But even without the federal-backed bond, it's a bankable transaction. You get that money back in 5 years.
My thoughts exactly. I've always wondered. We talk about, phantom project, phantom bridge, but it's doable by private individuals.
Exactly, it is. And I wrote a paper, I wrote to all the governors. So why can't we do this?
Yeah.
Why do we need to wait? And, everybody complaining, the government didn't do that. Let's wait for the government. We don't need to. But that's, again, that is where leadership comes in. So if you get visionary leadership, then some of these things can be achieved very quickly. The key to investment in Nigeria is local direct investment. You're always going to get the foreign direct investment. They're going to keep complaining. They don't live here. They have no emotional attachment to Nigeria. So if they decide not to come here, you can't face them. You can't blame them, okay? Because you have to put your things together. But the local folks are attached emotionally to Nigeria. They have blood attachments to Nigeria. So it's an easier sell to get the local folks investing in Nigeria. They're not investing in Nigeria in the way they should be because they're doing it on an individual basis. So individually, it's not able to achieve the kind of impact that will move the society forward. So you're going to have a lot of small investments that are dissipated and spread extremely thin. But if you want to have mega impact, you need big projects. And to do big projects, you need to aggregate people. They need to come together and make it happen.
I feel like this aggregation goes back to your first question around how do you actually bring the three different countries in Nigeria together. They're telling us to wind down, but one of the things I do want you to comment on is you've talked a lot about so many different things in your papers you've written. You've talked about local direct investment, the fourth industrial revolution. If there were three things that you could recommend to the president, or three things you would like to hear in his inaugural address, what are they when it comes to development of Nigeria?
Well, the first thing would be jobs, because the security challenges we're having in Nigeria, I understand that the Abuja-Kaduna road is almost a no-go area because of kidnapping. I understand that Zamfara has been almost, all the citizens are running away because of kidnapping and armed bandits. All this is happening as a result of unemployment. Those things are just symptoms of a deeper problem. And the problem is unemployment. We need to get people to work. So the first thing he needs to do is, how do we create jobs? And he also needs to understand that jobs are not created by the federal government. That is another big mistake politicians make. So a politician hears job creation and he says, okay, I'm hiring 10,000 people, and he puts all of them on the payroll and he can't pay them. And then next month, they can't pay salaries. So that's not how jobs are created. So politicians need to be educated. When we say the president must create jobs, we're not referring to the federal government hiring people. What we're referring to is create the atmosphere for the private companies to create jobs. How do you create an atmosphere like that? You give guarantees for certain projects. So instead of going back to the example of the Niger Bridge, instead of the federal government investing in that project, You could have allowed private people to come together, but you give them a federal government guarantee. So when you get a guarantee, it means that the money gets raised very easily and very quickly. So you use the power of federal guarantees on specific projects. That way you create tremendous amount of jobs. You can do that very quickly in 6 months. You identify projects across the country, issue guarantees, jobs are created. It's very easy to do. And those jobs are within the private sector, so folks will become very busy. The next issue would be education, so which dovetails to the first issue. So you need to, because it's a conveyor belt. If you're not educating people, then they're not going to be able to fill in the new jobs that you're creating, and so it becomes a vicious cycle. So you need to get people educated, which means we need to make sure that the institutions that are responsible for education are doing the right thing. Right now, education has almost collapsed in Nigeria. Lecturers are demanding sex from young women. They're demanding money from young men to pass marks. So there's all kinds of horrible things going on in our educational institutions. The president needs a fire eater as the Minister of Education, somebody who can go into that environment, into that industry, and clean it up. So yes, we need the new skills in STEM sciences, science, technology, engineering, and maths, but we also need the system to work, because right now the system is not working. There's so much corruption in the educational system. There's so much corruption in the schools. That needs to change, And then, of course, I will agree with infrastructure, which will be the third way, because if we're going to be investing in agriculture and agricultural processing, we need the roads to get the agricultural implements out. One thing I didn't mention is that whereas I advocate for the investment in the mines and the people, because that is where the best potential is, another great potential is in agricultural processing. Nigeria is the second in the world, the second to third largest producer of cashew nuts in the entire world. Nigeria is the first, number one, largest producer of cassava in the entire world. Number one, largest producer of yam in the entire world. I mean, we have products in the agricultural sector that we lead the world, but we're not doing anything about it. We don't process, we still import ethanol and alcohol, whereas we have the largest producer of cassava, which you can easily extract ethanol and alcohol from cassava. It's
so much work to do.
Well, so it's amazing.
Dr. Okoye, it's a pleasure having you on. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.